Here I'm going to do a deep dive into the definitions of the horticulture produce which will be regulated. So we're looking here at how berries, melons and leafy vegetables are defined in Biosecurity Tasmania's Phase 2 draft regulations. Now, several submissions in Phase 1 made the observation that the definitions in the draft regulations that were released for that phase were inconsistent with the relevant food safety standards. In their summary documentation, Biosecurity's response to these submissions was to state that the regulations adopt the PPP standards for berries, leafy vegetables and melons, and that the scope of commodities and activities regulated under the draft regulations is consistent with those set out in the PPP standards. So I think what we can take from that is that it is absolutely clear that the intention of Biosecurity Tasmania is that the regulations that they have drafted are consistent with the PPP standards. So we're going to do a little bit of Statutory Interpretation 101, and I'm going to explain why their draft definition is not consistent. So on the left here, we have the standard in relation to berries definition from Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, which is that berries means fresh berries and includes strawberries, blueberries and berries from the genus Rubus. The Phase 2 draft regulations from Biosecurity Tasmania say that berries means the following fresh berries intended for human consumption: berries from the genus Rubus, blueberries and strawberries. So what we know is clear from both definitions is that strawberries, blueberries and berries from the genus Rubus, which includes raspberries, blackberries, loganberries, silverberries, tayberries, marionberries and all the berries that look the right shape of those is a good guide, that they are berries that grow on canes and they're from the genus Rubus. So there's no argument that those things are included in the definition, but if we look at the definitions, so I've got two pictures here. One is of some gooseberries. Now these ones aren't fresh because it's not fresh berry season, but this is what I had on my shelf. So some gooseberries and then some dried Tasmanian pepperberries. Now, assume both of those are fresh, okay? So assume that I have produced or harvested gooseberries and Tasmanian pepperberries. If we look at the food standards definition, berries means fresh berries, and it includes the ones that we've already mentioned. So the gooseberries and the Tasmanian pepperberries would fall within that definition because they are berries and we're assuming that they're fresh. So they would be included in the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand definition from Standard 4.2.7. By contrast, the way that berries is defined in the Phase 2 draft regulations from Biosecurity Tasmania confines the meaning of berries only to the ones that are mentioned, because it doesn't say that berries means all fresh berries. It says that berries means the following fresh berries. There's no expansive scope in the way that they have drafted that definition. So if they are intending to be consistent with the primary production and processing standards, then they need to adopt the definition that is actually contained in those standards. A similar issue arises for melons. So we have specific kinds of melons mentioned: the honeydew, piel de sapo, rock melon and watermelon. Now, let's face it, if you can grow melons in Tasmania, you're doing pretty well. So if we look to the left, the standard 4.2.9 food standard defines melons as meaning fresh melons, so that's all the melons, and as including those specific ones that are mentioned. Whereas the Phase 2 draft regulations confines the meaning of melons to the following fresh melons, the ones that are listed. Now, one of the few melons that you might successfully try to grow in Tasmania is the Pepino melon, which is a cool climate variety, which does not appear on that list. That would fall within the Food Standards Australia definition, but does not fall within the Phase 2 draft regulations definition. So again, there's an inconsistency there. Now let's move on to the difficult question of when is a vegetable a leafy vegetable? Now, one of the main concerns or issues here is that botanically every vegetable has leaves because leaves are the engine of photosynthesis, which plants need to survive. So all vegetables have leaves, so there needs to be some constraint on the meaning of vegetable for us to decide which ones are leafy vegetables and which ones are not. And again, the way that leafy vegetables are defined is different between the standard and Biosecurity Tasmania's Phase 2 draft regulations. So standard 4.2.8 says that leafy vegetables means vegetables of a leafy nature where the leaf is consumed raw. So we're confining from all the vegetables to those that are of a leafy nature and where the leaf is consumed raw. So they are the category of vegetables that the food standards people intend to be regulated about because they are the higher risk vegetable than other vegetables. And then we've got some lists of things that are included and not included. By contrast, again, the Tasmanian Phase 2 draft regulations confines leafy vegetables to only the ones listed, which are baby leaves, leafy herbs and lettuce. So those words in the food standards, vegetables of a leafy nature and the leaf is consumed raw, are doing a lot of work. Whereas the Phase 2 draft regulations have this very restrictive meaning of just the following leafy vegetables, and the Tasmanian draft regulations do not carry over that really important part of the food standards definition, is that we're talking about vegetables where the leaf is going to be consumed raw. That's what the food standards are supposed to apply to. Now, in terms of, so a cabbage, so let's say we're using the cabbage to make a salad, we're going to eat it raw. A cabbage would fall within the food standards definition, but it would not fall within the current draft from Biosecurity Tasmania. I've got a question mark over Swiss chard or silver beet. So the issue I have with that is not that it's clearly a vegetable of a leafy nature, but once it's mature and it's not baby leaves mix, I'm not sure how many of us would be eating that particular vegetable raw, but maybe it's a bit more common than I think. Now, Biosecurity Tasmania has in its summary documentation for Phase 2 helpfully told us what it intends to be included and not included in the definition of leafy vegetables. And they state in that document that leafy vegetables are vegetables of a leafy nature where the leaf is consumed raw. So this is more evidence that they actually do think that their regulations mirror the definitions that are in the food standards, even though that's not the case just yet. So we've got lots of different kinds of lettuce. Apparently rocket is a lettuce. Kale, chicory, watercress, Swiss chard and silver beet, Asian leafy greens, all leafy herbs that are consumed raw, so your garnishes, spring onions, microgreens, spinach leaves and cabbage. They're all included, but they are not an exclusive list. So it's very clear that Biosecurity Tasmania intends that those things are included in the definition of leafy vegetable, but other things might be leafy vegetables that do not appear on that list. And then they've provided clarification about all the things that are not leafy vegetables. Now, seed sprouts have their own food standards, so that's why they are excluded, because they are under a different scheme. Now, we could get quite pedantic about all of this. So we could question whether kale, Swiss chard, silver beet and rosemary are vegetables where the leaf is consumed raw, and then some of us might actually eat the leaves of vegetables that are not classified as leafy vegetables, such as beetroot or carrot leaves, kohlrabi leaves and celery leaves. But anyway, there's no point being too pedantic about this, because it's always going to be a little bit artificial because of that botanical reality that all vegetables are leafy to some degree. The key thing is that it's the leaf that is intended to be consumed, and that it is intended to be consumed raw. So, where does that leave us to answer the question of when is a vegetable a leafy vegetable? I think even though the draft regulations haven't quite got it right yet, we should assume that Biosecurity Tasmania will make a further amendment to their draft so that the definitions actually do mirror the food safety standards.